what I would say to you all at this stage is you should be very pleased with the progress that you've made in your maths maturity, is what I call it. Now, what I mean by that is the way that you approach maths now. Most of you know that unless you're paying attention to detail, you're thinking about exactly every little bit of work that you do, then you're probably not going to master this. So maths at this level now requires a sense of maturity, and I can see that you have all achieved that. So it's been really obvious through this chapter that unless you're thinking, is this a side? Is this an angle? Is this a right angle triangle? Is it not? Do I have 2 sides, 2 angles? Do I have 3 sides? If you're not thinking about those things as you approach a question, then you're probably finding that you're not getting the answers. So, well done to you for getting that concept, that thinking more maturely about maths. Now, it is really obvious in this next exercise that if you are doing that, you'll find this really easy. Why? Because we now move away from finding lengths of sides and the size of an angle. We're moving away from that. And it's really obvious. It's really obvious by the words of the question. The question will say, find the area. Find the area. Now, you found the area a long time ago. Area of a triangle is half the base times the perpendicular height. That word perpendicular meant you had to have a perpendicular. You had to have a right angle triangle, perpendicular. And again, maybe when you learnt that, you weren't thinking as maturely mathematically as you do now, but now you can realise that to use that formula, you have to have a right angle triangle. So we've seen throughout this chapter that we can work with triangles, and we do work with triangles, and find features about them, about these triangles, when they're not right angled. So that's the case here. So when we have a triangle and we don't know anything about this perpendicular height, we can use a different formula. And what we will need to know is, let's just focus on the format that the formula is written on your reference sheet. So I'll just scroll down. So back here to the last page, remember I talked about everything that's written on there, and this was the bit that I said we will do later, and that's where we are now. So this a half AB sine C. Now, you're not going to be tested on your ability to recall the formula because it's on the formula sheet. What you will be tested on is, do you know where and when to use it? So going back to our formula and getting into this more mature mindset about maths, let's have a think about the formula. What can you see? A half is a half. A just stands for area, equals. It's going to create an equation for us. A half is a half. What is A? A is a side. How do I know that? Because it's lowercase. What is B? B is also a side. How do I know that? Because it's lowercase. And what else do we have here? We must have an angle. Well, let's have a think about that. If we had sides A and B, these two sides, it doesn't really matter about that side because it's not involved in this formula. But the name of this angle down here would be capital A. How do I know that? Because it's always opposite. What would this one up here be called? It would be called B. Where does that sit, C? And hopefully you can see that C sits between A and B. Now that's really important. For you to be able to use this formula, you must know the angle between the two sides that you know. So on this diagram here, the two sides are A and B. C sits in the middle. So not only will we be tested on using this formula or knowing this formula, but using it correctly. Okay, let's have a look at the example. Triangle PTO has PT is 20, TO is 34, angle T is 46. Calculate the area. Calculate the area. It's not finding a side, it's not finding an angle. This is where we pay attention to the detail, which you've become very, very good at. You really have. Draw the diagram. Obviously, draw the diagram. Now, you could pause the video here because I'm going to draw it and then I'm going to jump straight back and you will see the diagram. It'll be a good opportunity for you to test and get some feedback for yourself on how well you're able to interpret the information that's given. So I suggest you pause the video. Now, your triangle may not look exactly like mine. You might have it in a different orientation. You might have your T at the top. You might have your T at the bottom left-hand side. It doesn't really matter. What you should find is you've got your 46 degrees between your two sides, 22 and 34, and that is all that matters for this formula. We could go straight to area is a half of AB sine C. We know that A and B are the two sides, and C is the angle between them. So we've got a half. We don't even really need to put A, B and C on it if we understand the formula. Two sides and the angle between them. Now you would write that in your key point. The area of a triangle is half the product multiplying the two sides times and the angle between them. So we've got times 22 times 34 times the sine of 46. Now, the common mistake that we find here is that students don't pay attention to the fact that this has to be sine. You have no choice. It has to be sine. And again, we see that students aren't careful there. And really that is truly throwing away a mark, because that's on your reference sheet, your formula sheet. It's given to you. But if we're not doing our maths thinking about every step, then we might not really think about the fact that I should be writing sine there. So keep doing what you've been doing, which is paying attention to all the little details. If you're still having trouble with the calculator, again, make sure you let me know. I think the most common mistake calculator-wise is that either your calculator somehow gets into something other than degrees, so you need to be able to get it back, or you don't close off your bracket. And so you can see that the answer is 269. And again, you need to follow the instruction, because the mark could be awarded here when the instruction's given to the nearest square millimetre. We know these were in millimetres because of back here, so we've got rounding that to the nearest is 269. I think the video is getting long enough now that I'll stop it and I'll do the kite example in the next video.